Welcome, Butterscotch Queens and Kings, to your only source for inclusive and comprehensive crypto coverage. This is The Get Down, a podcast diving deep into Web3 and DeFi. I'm your host, Ritzy P. Each episode, I get down with diverse founders, builders, change makers, and executives in the cryptoverse. The crypto industry is not a monolith. Black, Latino, and indigenous stories matter. Join diverse discussions on policy trends and market research about the blockchain ecosystem. Welcome to The Get Down.
Welcome to the Get Down Beyond Bitcoin podcast. I'm Cleve Mesidor, your host for this special episode with none other than SEC Commissioner Hester Peirce. I am thrilled that she's joining us today. Such a treat. She is, as you know, crypto mom. I call her crypto's architect, but she has been a leading voice in Washington for crypto, and we are so glad that she made time for our audience. So, without further ado, I'm excited to dive into my conversation with two-term Commissioner Hester Peirce. Thank you for joining us, SEC Commissioner Hester Peirce. You're affectionately known as Crypto Mom. I affectionately refer to you as Crypto's Architect. You joined the SEC in January 28, a pivotal time for the crypto industry. A month earlier, Bitcoin had just hit $20,000 for the first time in a reverse course, but got the attention of Wall Street and Washington. What was your light bulb moment? Was it simply joining the SEC as a commissioner at that pivotal time? Or was there something else? Because you seem genuinely passionate about this new aspect of the financial paradigm. Tell us your crypto origin story.
Well, thanks, Cleve. It's great to be with you. And I have to tell you first that my views are my own views as a commissioner, not necessarily those of the SEC or my fellow commissioners. I was aware of Bitcoin before I started at the SEC. I had worked with someone, Jerry Brito, who probably a lot of you know, and he told me about Bitcoin, and I was intrigued by it. But I didn't realize how big a part of my job at the SEC it would be to think about these kinds of issues and how Bitcoin and other crypto assets would integrate with the financial system. I think what, for me, sort of intrigued me is this idea that you could eliminate intermediaries, because that's an area where historically we as securities regulators have seen issues. There are a lot of wonderful intermediaries, but there have also been situations where you've had intermediaries that have stolen or have been careless with client assets. And you've seen other situations where intermediaries have said, well, we'll provide service to one group of people, but not to another group of people. And so I think part of what drew me into this technology is the idea that you can interact with code in a way that is predictable to everyone. Everyone's operating with it on the same terms, and it operates automatically, so you don't need that centralized intermediary. Now, there are many people who are going to want to engage in the financial system with an intermediary, and that is completely fine. I think optionality is great. And I think we are seeing now that the traditional financial system is looking at this technology to see how it can leverage that technology to benefit its clients, to make its back office operations more efficient, to enable people to have everything on chain, and which makes it easier to move collateral. It can really add to efficiency. So I think we are seeing a world in which people will have the option to choose intermediaries using the technology or to use the technology directly themselves without intermediaries.
So it was serendipity that you ended up at the SEC and have been able to really impact the infrastructure. Well, speaking of infrastructure, as a regulator, you've dealt, and as a regulator in closing out your second term, you've dealt with a lot of aspects of the industry. One of the areas that's trickier than it should be is this issue of harmonization, right? Especially with the blockchain and cryptocurrency space. We've seen the importance of the SEC and the CFTC, and we've seen the conflicts. And we know that moving towards harmonization would actually be helpful. Tell us more about how you're tackling that. We've seen guidance coming out of the FDIC, CFTC, OCC, and the SEC trying to move towards that. Why is that important, and what are some of the next steps?
Yeah, really, harmonization across the financial regulators really is important, and it is just a function of the fact that we have a very different kind of financial regulatory structure than in some other areas. We have a lot of different regulators, both on the banking side and then, as you mentioned, the CFTC and the SEC, as well as state regulators who also play an important role. And so, given that, it's really important that all of us work together. And I think we do that through a lot of bilateral contacts, right? And also through things like the Financial Stability Oversight Council. But I think especially important for us now is the relationship with the CFTC, because we both do have existing authorities that allow us to regulate in this space, and also under the Clarity Act, which we're hoping will be done soon. That would also give both of us authority, and so would require us to work together. We have a harmonization task force basically set up. We've got a very active work stream where we're doing that. I don't love the term work stream, but we're working together quite closely. And I think it builds on prior efforts, but I think it's really intended to ingrain in the two agencies a habit of talking to each other before we take steps that could affect the other's jurisdiction. And it's really coming from a place where both Chairman Seelig and Chairman Atkins both are not trying to fight for jurisdiction. It's more, we're both serving the American people. How can we get to a good place where it makes sense? And maybe both of us have some regulatory interest in a particular product, but we can figure out how to share information to make sure that we're both getting the information we need, even though maybe there'll be a single lead regulator. When I first started, there was an effort to work on security-based swaps and swaps, and that was something that I worked with Brian Quintenz, who's a very well-known figure in crypto as well. And so he and I worked closely on trying to have as much harmonization as we could in that area. And I think the current effort really builds on that and tries to look across all of what we do and harmonize the efforts.
Well, I'm glad you're making inroads. I know previous administrations have talked about this, so it's wonderful that I feel like crypto has led us to a path where we're actually moving towards this, and this won't just benefit the digital asset space, right? This
Exactly.
is good for fintechs and traditional finance. Well, talking about what's good for fintechs and traditional finance, tokenization. One of the great evolutions of crypto, when you look at stablecoins, with this opportunity for tokenization, we see the opportunity for, TradFi incumbents and even big crypto, the large companies. I'm curious about your thoughts for smaller players, right? There's so many, obviously for the SEC, you look at tokenized securities, and the FDIC looks at tokenized deposits and so on and so forth. But I do think that there has to be opportunities for smaller players. We're recording this during Small Business Month, and would love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that tokenization I think it's really exciting, and there are a lot of different efforts out there to try to see how it can help. But I think you're right that it could be particularly useful for small entities. It's a good way I think, for issuers to be able to communicate with the holders of their securities. And that is always something that issuers are wanting to do. And so I think that's one area. And then I think there are other places where tokenization could potentially be helpful. Because it'll be easier to hold and transfer these kinds of securities, it could be helpful there. It could be helpful in terms of proxy voting, those kinds of things. So I'm excited to see the potential.
Well, me too. I think, we are moving towards an industry that is, $4 trillion market. But small businesses, entrepreneurs, startups are still the engine of the United States. I do want to say that you're not just a champion, you also hold the industry accountable, and you call out when there are gaps. What is your advice to the crypto industry about how to continue to advance crypto rulemaking going forward? as glitches happen, as there are problems? What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, my primary piece of advice at this time is build useful things, build things that actually serve a population that meets a problem that's actually out there. This is the moment where you have a really favorable regulatory structure. And I think you're asking the question in the right way, because it's not that we just want the number to go up. That's not the regulator's prerogative at all. It's really building a framework within which people can identify problems they want to solve and solve those problems and have an understanding of the regulatory structure, so that the regulatory structure is not the overhanging thing that's always worrying them, right? We want it to be clear enough so that they understand it. We want it to create incentives for people to really build long-term valuable projects. And so it requires good faith on both the part of us, the regulators, which again, I think we really tried to turn the page there and say we are going to take a more productive approach that recognizes that people want to build stuff that's commercially viable. But it also requires, on the other side, on the side of people in the industry, to lean into that and to build things that are useful, to be candid with us about what it is you need to do things that are commercially viable, but also to be responsible in how you're thinking about disclosure and how you're thinking about making sure that the people buying your tokens are protected in ways that make sense. A lot of that doesn't require regulatory intervention. You can do that on your own. And there have been industry-led efforts to improve disclosure, for example. And so I think a lot of those kinds of efforts on the part of the industry will play well into the regulatory approach. And I think we can get to a better place that way.
I love that advice. Build things that people need, build things that are sound, and come in and talk. Well, you certainly left your door open, which has been great. And in terms of the industry being able to share and talk about what are some of the challenges, which tells me that you will be very missed since you've opted not to seek another term. You'll be leaving as of June 2026. What's next? I assume you're not done with crypto yet.
Well, I am not done. I think I'll be certainly watching what goes on. I should say that the June deadline is not really, I have to leave by the end of the year, so
Oh,
it
good.
will be sometime before the end of the year. When exactly is TBD. But
December 31st.
but I do look forward to watching what the SEC does, and as every time there's a new commissioner, really adds a new perspective that can be so important and can be very helpful in moving things forward. So I actually think it's going to be fantastic for the industry and for investors to have this new voice, to have a fresh outlook on things. And I will be very excited to watch that from the outside, though I suspect that I'll be teaching or something like that. So I don't know that I'll be right in the middle of everything, but I will be cheering on sound regulation from the outside.
Cheering on sound regulation. Well, I'm glad to hear that June is not a hard deadline, but I do think that, the industry could probably use you for another term, especially at this pivotal moment. We might be passing clarity, hopefully this year. And then there are so many other pieces of legislation to actually move through a regulatory framework. But excited about the new voices, and I'm sure you won't be going too far. But before I let you go.
Yeah, and I mean, I'd just say that I think you're so right to point out the fact that this moment is going to be pivotal. Getting the legislation across the finish line is a huge amount of work, but there will be a lot of work at the regulatory level. It will require us to work on harmonization through that effort with the CFTC, which I think I mislabeled as task force. It's not a task force. It has another name. But anyway, so that working together with the CFTC on that will be so important. Getting input from folks out there, because so much gets shaped through the regulations, so that will be important. I can't say that I won't be sad to not be directly part of those efforts, but I think, again, so much can be shaped by people working earnestly from the outside and from the inside, and I know that effort will continue. We need to get to the right place, and that will require a lot of continued hard work.
Yes, I agree. To get to that right place with that regulatory framework that can actually allow the next generation to build will take work. But again, that inside-outside strategy. Now, I do want to close out by asking you about memorable moments or milestones along your crypto journey. I know for me, I still love your 2021 speech, Paper Plastics, Peer-to-Peer, and also more recently, the stand-up style remarks that you did at the Coin Center dinner when they returned to New York City last year. Please share a few memorable moments or milestones over the 2 terms since 2018 that you've had that you'll probably think back fondly on.
Yeah, I mean, there have been a lot of really special moments, but I think for me, the best moments have been meeting with people who are trying to work on things in this space. Again, to go back to what I said before, they're trying to solve real problems, and they are smart, dedicated people who just want to build good things. And for me, it's inspiring to meet with them because I met with people like that who were building in times of great regulatory uncertainty, and they were pressing forward anyway because they felt very strong conviction about the particular problems they were trying to solve and their particular solutions. And so those moments will always be tremendously special because those are people that I admire greatly for the effort that they were putting in at such a difficult regulatory time, and also just for their desire to help solve problems that humanity is facing. And that's what it's ultimately all about. So I will treasure those.
I love that how you say that, build good things. And certainly people have been building good things in an environment that hasn't been always regulatorily friendly or without the policies needed. So as we close, I appreciate your time. I do want to just have you talk a bit about the future, not your future, but the future of crypto. Think that Gen Z will play an important role in the future of crypto. But they are the Roblox economy, right? They are already creating financial instruments and economies through gaming without the government overload. So when they actually start building, we'll hopefully have the regulatory framework in place. How do you think crypto will evolve with them over the next decade or two?
I mean, I wonder if it will be just for them the way the internet is for us. You know, it became part of what we just of how we live. And so I hope that, you know, there's a lot of uh, you know, political divisiveness, other kinds of divisiveness, and I hope that we can remember that this is just a technology, right? It can be used for good and it can be used for bad, and so let's choose to use it for the good of bringing us together instead of for the bad of dividing us. And I hope, I mean, I know that again maybe sounds a little Pollyannish, but I think we should always be looking for things that will draw us together. And so I hope that we can look to this technology and see how can it make us work as a society better? How can it make more people's lives fulfilling, and how can we help solve problems and really link arms and solve those problems together? And let's look for ways where this technology actually will help do that. It's not going to solve every problem. We all know that. Let's be realistic. But let's also be willing to say, hey, you know, this may be an area where this technology could actually solve problems. This may be an area where people will be able to use crypto assets in ways that will make their lives better and easier and make them be able to pass along more to their children and serve their societies better.
I'm optimistic also about the future of crypto. I think, the opportunity to solve problems, this technology is there. It's not all encompassing or silver bullet. But I do want to share personally how much I've appreciated you in this industry and really appreciate you taking the time to share with our audience more about not just your experience, but your thoughts. And, Commissioner Hester Peirce, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Cleve, for taking the time, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.